And we're live.
Hey, Janet.
Hiya.
Hello. We're just going to wait another minute before we officially start.
Okay.
I'm really glad to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. Very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you bet. And we are streaming and recording on YouTube, and I believe recording on Zoom as well.
Excellent. Good. And let's hope we get some nice people joining us then.
Yes. Yeah.
I've just had a very interesting meeting with somebody and we were discussing hybrid working. So that was another source of information. So it's definitely at the top of everybody's minds at the moment.
It is. Well, we'll get into a good conversation about that.
Yeah.
Got a couple people in our waiting room. Let's just admit all and turn off the waiting room. So welcome folks on YouTube and people coming in to the webinar here. I just want to introduce this webinar. I'm Lori Shook, I'm from Shook Svensson, and this is Rewiring Your Workplace. It's a series of webinars that we've just started a couple of months ago. And we just decided to change the format of these webinars, which I'm really excited about. And the format is going to be a conversation between two of us. And I've invited Janet Baker here today, and I'll have her introduce herself in just a moment. And we're going to be talking about what is working, as in what is working in workplaces. And a lot of our focus is going to be on hybrid working today, because that's the hot topic. You might have heard Janet say that just a moment ago. It's, you know, at this stage of the pandemic and where we are, it's what's on a lot of people's minds. How are we going to organize this? What's working with it? What isn't? How do we fix it? And that kind of thing. So we'll be looking at all of that. Let's see. So those of you who are here, hi, Jeff, I can see you over there. You'll be on mute for at least the first half hour, and as Janet and I are having our discussion, feel free to add in, and I'll be reminding people of that throughout. And then we'll get more of a conversation going after that. So Janet, would you please introduce yourself? Let me say a word about you first, though. So I Janet and I just met. I was running a webinar a couple of weeks, or a guest on a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and Janet was an active participant, and clearly we had a lot in common and a lot to talk about. And I thought, well, what a great place to start with our conversation webinars. So that's why I invited Janet, and I'm learning about her as well. So please introduce yourself, Janet.
Thank you, Laurie. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your webinar, especially being the first person on your new design of webinar. It's a real honour, so thank you for that. Yes, my name's Janet Baker. My company is Inspire Training Midlands. I've been a trainer now for about 25 years. I know I must have started when I was about 4 years old. I know you're thinking that. No, I'm joking. Yes, and before that I was trained as a bilingual secretary, so I had a lot of admin sort of related background, but moved into training. Well, took my CIPD qualification, decided to go down the training route, and have never looked back. I love it. I'm very passionate about training. I've qualified as a coach quite a number of years ago as well, about 18 years ago, and I love it. I really do. And I find the two linking extremely well together. I work with all kinds of clients in the arts. I work in education. I work with manufacturing companies, with service organisations, public sector. So quite a broad range of experience to draw from. And I learn in every organisation I'm with as to different ways of working. So this is quite a good way of me transmitting some of that learning to you, but also learning from you to feed back to them as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, good. I could tell that you had a lot of experience in a lot of different organizations. You seem to really bring that breadth of understanding how organizations work, and of course that's not consistent across the board.
No.
There's such a variety, isn't there?
I think I've worked in a lot of different organizations as well. Before I came self-employed, I worked with different organizations. So I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in service, I've worked in public sector before, so that helps me when I'm working with them, because I can understand where they're coming from as well.
Yeah. That's great. I'm so curious. What other languages completely off topic? What other language did you speak? What were you bilingual?
I did train originally with French and German, but don't ask me to do it now because I've forgotten so much. It's the use it or lose it, isn't it? And once I came out of that bilingual role, I just didn't use it. I can go to France and order my croissant and coffee and so on, and I can say Dankeschön in German and things like that, and that's about the limit of it now. Not quite so bad in French as I am in German, but yes, don't ask me to go down that route.
Okay. Well, it's fascinating. I'm getting to know you. So, and I think learning languages also brings another aspect to understanding workplace cultures and the different things that people want. So I think that's definitely an aspect that's helpful. So let's jump in. So what is working is the title of this webinar. And you and I spoke earlier today, and we were talking a lot about hybrid working, and I was just reading some CIPD, a bit of research that says that more than half people want to stay working at home, at least part-time, when we go back to normal, which is never going to happen, but when the pandemic calms down, as it is starting to, and we don't know exactly, fingers crossed, we don't know exactly where that's going to go, but certainly a lot of people are vaccinated and a lot of people are going back to offices. So let's just start broad. Janet, what are you noticing in the people you're working with about going back to the office?
I've noticed that, more recently, our organisations are definitely aware of the need to implement some kind of formal structure into hybrid working. I've just been talking to a lady from a local council, and she said they don't even like the term hybrid working, so they're working on a different term to that. So maybe it's flexible working, maybe some organisations will adapt hybrid as the name of it. But everybody is getting very much more aware of the need to be flexible and look at it from a task point of view. I think with some jobs are going to be more flexible than others. So one company I work with locally, the customer service section doesn't really work. Even though it's all phone based, it doesn't work so well. It was very disjointed when they were having to work from home. They're back working in the workplace now, and they work better as a team now that they're in the workplace, but it didn't work for them before. But equally, then they've got the sales team have always worked from home. One of their staff who's on the creative side, he works from home now. He didn't before, but he starts at 6 o'clock in the morning because he's got a baby, and that's the time the baby wakes up. He takes a break at lunchtime to take his baby round the park. And that enables him, the way he's working from home, it enables him to be flexible, not only with his job, and he's getting his job done, which is all they're worried about, but it's enabling him to be flexible with his family environment. And he said he's doing what a lot of dads can't do, and that's participate in the growing up, the day-to-day of the baby side of things. And obviously when it gets older, do the nursery and so on, and it's lovely to see that. And I've heard that from quite a few people. The lady I spoke to earlier today, she's a grandma, so she gets to go and pick her grandchildren up from school once a week because that's the day that she's working from home. So it does enable a nice work-life balance and flexibility, as long as the organization's able to be flexible with their time. And I think that's the thing. It's not just, do we work from home, do we work at work in the office, but does it work with being flexible with their actual hours of work as well?
Yeah.
And that's come through an awful lot.
And it seems like it takes some leaders and managers who trust.
Trust is the biggest part of it. And I think there's been some elements. I've been coaching a couple of people where the trust hasn't been there. And it might be that they've lost the trust in the way they've worked. It might be that they don't function very well, so they're not working so productively, so the manager loses that trust as well. So I think the trust is the biggest part of it, really. But if you've got good systems in place and good relations, it should work better. The ones that are working well have got good communication structures and good relations, and the managers know their staff, so they know if things start to tip on a balance a little bit, which when we think about it, there's a lot of wellness involved. I mean, we spoke about this morning. Wellness comes into every single area of this, and that's physical wellness, that's mental wellness, psychological wellness, and it impacts on everything. So if a manager is knowing their team member well, they will notice that slight change in behavior or attitude or contribution or performance.
Yeah, and the lesser performance, or I'm not going to say lack of performance, but the lower performance, the slight slips might just be because people are overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was certainly happening in early pandemic lockdown days. And there's still an effect from that, because I don't think most people recognize how stressed we are.
Oh, definitely. And one example I've got is one lady who was working from home, and she's normally used to a desktop computer with 2 screens, and at a desk in the office. She was working from home on a laptop, sitting on her sofa with the laptop on the coffee table. So that's not physically ideal. Yeah. But she said it was taking her longer because she could only have one screen view at a time. So she'd have the screen come up. She was writing down the information off that screen, going off onto another screen to then put that information back on to an email to colleagues. Whereas before she would have it on 2 screens and cut and paste. Right. I don't know why she wasn't cutting and pasting between screens. I'm not sure. But when I was coaching her, I just said to her, why don't you ask for a second screen? And she hadn't thought about it. So sometimes they're so focused on what they've been given, they don't even think about what they need. And I think it's maybe incumbent upon a manager to actually ask what is needed. And if they're having regular one-to-ones with them, they shouldn't assume that it's exactly the same as what they had in the office. It's different. Their circumstances are different, their timing's different, their motivation's different, and it's almost like starting a new employee and starting at the beginning again.
Yeah. I was in an office place recently where there were some people working, well, everyone was working in the office a few days a week. And then they were expected to work from home a couple of days a week. In a similar situation where they didn't all have the kit at home, and where the guys that are making more money at the higher end of this hierarchy, it's no big deal for them to buy their kit, their whole setup. But for the people who are newer, younger, making less money, it's a huge investment just to get another screen. And there was a whole conversation about, can the company provide the extra screen? And when you think about the cost to somebody, about like this thing of, I've only got one screen, I'm going to write something down. That's huge time expense.
But really, the company should be either funding that or helping them. I think it was easier in lockdown. When you were completely locked down, you had to be at home, and they could literally shift whatever they'd got at work, perhaps technology-wise, and shift it into the home. If you're working between two locations, so 2 days a week you're in the office, 3 days a week you're at home, equipment isn't going to travel so well then. So you would have to then think about technology and how you're going to set them up, and how temporary is it, and where. I've got an office, I'm fine, but my husband, when he works at home, works and he's only 20% of his time he's based at home anyway. He's downstairs on our dining table. When my son was home from university, because they closed down, he was in his room on his desk. But there were 3 of us trying to work from home. Then you get the technology of the issues of, is there enough Wi-Fi bandwidth to cope with 3 of us working from home, having Zoom calls and so on. But the technology is a massive issue for people. And like you say, if they can't afford to buy the extra technology, I'm set up because that's my business. But and we've set up my son's room to have all that technology as well, so he's fine. But if people haven't got that money, then it's an added pressure to them that could be very, very stressful.
And some companies are opening their doors 5 days a week if their employees want to come to the workplace because they don't have the setup at home. So some do have that flexibility, and I've met some people who said, I'm done working from home. Done. Too much sharing of broadband, and too many others around. And well, in London, some of the younger people are sharing flats, and they might have 3 or 4 people if they're fighting over the dining room table.
Exactly.
During a day with so I think some people are wanting to go back to the office full time, which is great, and it's great if the employer gives them the option. So
but then it's setting up at home that doesn't intrude in your family environment as well, isn't it? Because well, my husband's office is closed now locally to us. So what used to be a service that he could go, he's based at home, okay, he's out on the road the rest of the time. But to have no office there now, he's lost services. So things like if he needs to send something by DHL, the office manager did that. He's had to find out where to get that from, what to do, how to do it. And then there's also the little added things of, well, who's going to be in the house when the DHL guy comes to pick it up? Because I'm not always here. He's not always here. So it's trying to organise that. And then it's things like when he's sending abroad, he doesn't know how to do the customs paperwork. And it's the little things like that. The company closed the office, the physical office, made the lady redundant, but nobody thought, well, how are they going to do her job in the meantime? So it's thinking a lot broader, a lot more out of the box of just the function of, oh, well, everyone else can do it. So
so I think
we've also got a storage problem of things that he used to collect from there. He used to collect samples in bottles and so on, paint samples, not other samples. All the plastic bottles, the 5-litre plastic bottles, were stored there. So he would go in and pick them up. Guess where they're stored now? In his boot. Guess what was in the boot of the car is now stored, it's in the house. And when we have little sample bottles, sacks of them in the house. And all the paperwork in the house, because he has no storage facility now, so that gets frustrating as well.
Sure. So there's a lot to consider. It's complex, actually. It's not just, oh, I'll be at home for 2 days a week or whatever. It's how will we really function smoothly like we used to. Absolutely. In a different new way, because it's probably not going to be the same as it was.
Yeah, and it's got to be work-wise and home-wise, because those two are now becoming very much interwoven in that way.
Yeah. I was really fascinated when we talked this morning about the legalities of providing providing what people need, and the health and the safety, just the health thing. Maybe you could share some of that, because that was something I had not thought about.
Yeah. Well, in companies, you have to have a health and safety assessment. They do risk assessments, and your workstation should be set up in a safe way. You've got display screen equipment regulations. I think the last ones came in about 2002, but it governs how your workstation is set up. So at work, we have adjustable chairs. We have you can ask for a footrest if your legs are shorter and aren't comfortable reaching the floor. And when I used to train on this, I used to say your legs have to be parallel with the floor. You should be at a height on your chair where your arms are parallel with your legs, which are parallel with the floor. You can use your keyboard that's a right distance away from your body. Your eyes should be the eye level should be at the top, roughly at the top level of your screen, which all ticks. That's easy to tick those boxes when you're at work. When you're at home and you've been given a laptop and you're sitting on your sofa and you're scrunched over it, or just working on a laptop anyway is not conducive to good working, because your screen's too low. So if you can get raise your screen and get a separate keyboard, that would help. Some people don't like using the mouse pad, so have a mouse. And it's working out at home how you can be healthy and not sort of scrunched up over it. But it's looking at the regulations. I believe it's if you work 5 hours or more at home, you should be complying with regulations, which puts a big burden on health and safety people, big burden on HR people, and also on the managers, because as a supervisor or a manager, you are responsible for your team members' health and safety. So if they come in and they're saying, I've got repetitive strain injury, or I've got a neck injury or something, that can then come back on the organisation as well. So it's worth checking what the setup is and whether you're doing risk assessments or anything like that. I'll put a link in, actually. You can have a look at if people are interested. I'll just copy that down. I'll put it in the chat. There's the display screens regulations. It's a PDF and it just tells you what there is. So if people aren't sure, then they can go and have a look at that. But it tells you what you should be looking for. And really that should be happening at home as well, because your employees are still employed even though they're at home.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is, technology wise, with security as against health and safety, how secure is your Wi-Fi? How secure are your files at home? And I think my worry is we've got GDPR and data protection and so on. What at work you're covered for that, but are people covered at home to be taking files with people's personnel details on, or contact information on, and so on? You're registered as an office, but how does that affect people at home when they've got files open on their desks? So there's a lot of legal side to be worked through as well.
Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about it very much until this morning when you brought it up, and I hadn't heard anybody else talking about it.
No, I think now HR are getting into the way of things. I think that will be something that will naturally come on board with them, because they think legally. So I think it's better, but it's for the managers to be aware of their responsibilities too. It might be a massive organisation and HR won't feed down necessarily to individuals, but I think managers really need to be thinking and finding out, well, how does this affect me? How does this affect my team? Because it's that broader thing. They don't want to be ending up being sued for repetitive strain injury or anything like that.
No, let's hope not. That's it would be quite unpleasant experience for everybody. But
Absolutely.
who knows where it's all going to go.
Exactly.
The other thing we talked about a lot this morning was well-being, and we mentioned it a little bit ago. But I'd love to put our attention there because that's been such a hot topic. Also,
Absolutely.
as people have been working from home, and I think most of the people I've talked with are thinking about the stress of home versus work and doing it all and not having the break in between. And then there's a lot of let's do well-being, and that usually ends up being meditation or these very specific things. But I'm really thinking that well-being is going to be more about integrated well-being. It's the physical well-being that we just talked about, because if your body hurts, that doesn't help your brain. And
Absolutely.
if your brain's not feeling well, you're not going to do your best work. But there's also, how do you just feel good overall about what you're doing? And
it's that holistic thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And communication can help with that. So managers can help by communicating well. I think they've got to appreciate that structures that worked well when it was an office-based situation have got to be changed. So it's maybe renew one-to-ones, have different one-to-ones. I know on that previous meeting that we were on a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Marshall Goldsmith's 6 questions. And you can Google it and go on. He talks about it on YouTube, and he's got his own website, and they are phenomenal questions to ask in one-to-one situations, and they're very much a sort of 360-degree question. How can I help you? How can you work better? What do you need from me? And things like that. And they are really useful questions, but I think they need to get to know their team in a very broad, very different way, in a broader way, to understand new difficulties they might be having. People have been very stressed and they feel very isolated at home. A lot of people do. A lot of people have loved it. And it's keeping that communication channel open. It's maintaining the networking, but not just in their teams. I think it's intra-teams as well. And I know some of the organizations I work with, they're setting up things in each team. The managers are setting up things for their own teams, but then they're looking at broader teams. My husband's company has regular town hall meetings. I'd never heard of the term before, and it's like I looked up town hall, and it's the corporate presentation or forum where they'll declare what's going on in this month or this week or however regularly they have them. But it's keeping the corporation side ticking over as well as the team side or the divisional side and so on. So they have different formats of the corporate ones are very much presentations. They don't want it's not a two-way thing, but then that gets fed down to the directors and the managers, and each time it gets smaller. So it's almost like a pyramid effect of how they work in it. But the communication has increased so much more now. I've noticed it with him. I walk into the kitchen and I can hear multilingual conversations going on, or multi-country conversations going on, and how people cope in all these different things, and it's different time zones and everything. It's just brilliant. It really is. I mean, it's wonderful to hear it, and especially as someone who used to be a linguist, it's really good. But then there's different problems again then, and different stresses. So, but they're trying to keep that communication going. But it's the one-to-one communication that I think is vital in all of this, to keep that going, because those are very different. And then do they have them face-to-face in the office, or do they have them online? How much is online? And things like meetings as well. Some companies that I've worked with have stated that all meetings, because they've got this hybrid working, some are working at home, some are at work, they've declared that all meetings have to be online. Because it's fair then, because everyone's in the same situation, they're all on screen. Whereas somebody working from home, so they've got 2 people working from home, the rest are in the office, there was that feeling of being disjointed, of, well, you're all sitting around the table and I'm stuck on a computer. So they had that declaration. most companies that I'm dealing with who have put things like that into place have said it's temporary, we're going to see how it runs for the next 6 months. So I think it's being very aware that this isn't written in stone. It's got to be
it's one big experiment, and it's got to be seen as an experiment, what's working, and let's keep sharing and talking and finding out what, sharing best practices and successes over there. This isn't a competition.
Absolutely.
Who can nail this and figure it out first.
One lady that I've spoken to who works for one of the local councils, she said they've done a staff survey and they surveyed what was wanted before. Then they put things in place, they survey their reactions and so on. So to keep asking staff, how is it working, what's working, and you're always going to get some it won't work for. One lady that I'm in touch with, she puts on weekly social events, so quizzes or whatever with her team, and she keeps the team, it's the coffee morning equivalent, or meeting around the water cooler or the photocopier, but she keeps the social side going, and they have, I don't know, Tuesday afternoon as a quiz afternoon, or they might come in a funny costume or something like that, or have another social type section, and that's really worked for them. So it's ways of keeping all aspects of communication open, the social and the business side open. On another company I work with, one of the ladies there said that they've got her team keep Zoom on or Teams on all the time, keep their camera on all the time in their team, so they're working together but they're remote. So they'll go, oh, did you see such and such on television last night? Oh, he was really great, wasn't he? And did you guess who it was? And did you see Strictly, or did you watch Bake Off? And they still have the same office conversations, but it's whilst they're working, but on camera. Just, and that's really working for them.
That's great.
It makes them feel less isolated, which is a major thing with the stress of working from home or trying to balance it all.
I tried that once or a couple of times last year, where a colleague and I, we kept our cameras open, put our mute buttons off. We'd come on and say, because we were co-working on something, and hey, how's it going? Okay, you go do this bit and I'll do that bit. And it was partly to get us motivated, to be honest. All right, let's get this thing done. And we come on camera, we leave the cameras on and turn mute on, and oh, hey, I have a question. And it was lovely.
I think it's really nice. If you've got to be remote, at least be sociably remote, can't you? I think it does work. But it's sharing ideas with other colleagues as well as to what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So one suggestion that I gave, when I've done stress management webinars and training for different organisations, when they're working at home, I've suggested if they're in you can't really say public, but in a family room where they've got to get out of it. So like my husband's in the dining room, have a big box, put everything in there, and by packing it away, you're mentally packing away work, shutting off work, move it out of the way, have your dinner on the table, and you're back into family mode. And just having a separation. I can walk out of my office and shut the door. That's my mental separation. But some people, if they've got all the work round them, at 9 o'clock at night, it's still there. They're not mentally able to switch off in the same way.
It's stressful, because it's always sitting over there.
Yeah, and it's just nagging at you then. It's like that little woodpecker, isn't it, going at you?
Yes. Yeah, a client of mine.
Kind of physical difference can help if you can shut off or put it away somehow.
Yeah, I've been working with some people who are doing just that, and they put things on pin boards, move them around, disappear them at the end of the day, and spend the time putting things in a box and moving it. That's like their commute time in a way.
Yeah, it's like compartmentalizing it, isn't it? It helps with that. I think another big stress that I've seen is people worry about, because there have been job losses because of COVID, and people have been furloughed and then not brought back. People are worried about their job situations and their prospects, but also people are worried that if I'm working from home too much, it might affect my promotion prospects. I feel I've got to go in, even though it's stressing me to go in because I feel vulnerable or whatever. And I think that's a thing that managers can definitely bear in mind if they can reassure staff that it won't affect their prospects. If they can allow them still to have training that will improve their prospects or some kind of development. I think training and development of staff so important. And to keep that on, and succession planning, because they need to see that there's a route. Some people need to see there's a route for them to go, and that can be part of the development, their development in the future as well, that they're not going to miss out on that.
Yeah. And then there's the whole collection of people who say, if I have to go back to the office place, I'll quit.
Absolutely.
You know, if I can't keep working from home and keep having a flex schedule, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And with companies increasing that flexible working, that's going to be a really tempting thing. Will they retain employees because of it or lose employees because of it, how they manage it? And then will other companies tempt them to stay?
Yeah. And how will teamwork go? Because a lot of people are missing that feeling of getting the team back together. And several of the teams I've been coaching are coming back together in the workplace, just dying to get back together.
Absolutely.
And see one another. And I mean, that builds well-being as well. Yeah. But they want to see one another and have that coffee together or just chat and, hear about what's happening.
It isn't the same on Zoom, is it?
It's not. It's not.
Definitely. I mean, I felt last year the last 18 months, the beginning of the pandemic, all my customers just shut down or stopped training because they wouldn't allow me in there. I hadn't set up with online training properly, so I could deliver on online training. So I was going through a major learning process there. But it was just that shock of and coaching. They didn't want training or coaching. It was just like, let's concentrate on the pandemic and how we're going to survive. They got people furloughed, or they've got people working from home, and it was just not thought of at first. I think once it had been on for quite a while, probably about a year, companies started to think, we've got to do something because this is actually it for a while. So then they started to invite me back, be it on doing online delivery, or some of them went back into the office. But before then, I found I was very isolated at home, and I'm used to working from home, but I'm used to going out and about.
Yes.
But I felt that isolation so keenly, and I joined a course, an online course, and we've got a community there, and I'm still with that community now. My husband commented on the difference when I came down after the first group meeting that we'd had, and we'd had little workshops and everything, and he goes, I've got you back. And he'd noticed that I'd really become withdrawn, because you can tell I'm not really quiet and withdrawn type of person. That sort of relit the fire, and he noticed that straight away. And I think, well, if that's me, and I consider myself to be a very resilient person, how are other people affected in the work environment? Some need that personal contact.
Absolutely. We're social beings. We're social animals. We need, and a lot of people are fine without it. And yet there's a whole lot of people that need that connection.
Definitely. Absolutely.
And then that brings us to the conversation about, well, what should teams do when they are in the workplace? Or what should the business do? Should they spend their time doing the same thing that people would be doing if they were at home? Just bring my laptop to work and maybe I plug it into my bigger monitors and keep doing the same thing? Or do we make these days special? And what does that mean? Which has been very exciting for us, of course, because, we're in the business of team coaching and, people interactions, and felt like, wow, people are recognizing, hey, people interactions are really important, and let's prioritize them, especially on those days when we all come to the office. Have you had that experience as well?
I'm working with a company at the moment doing quite a bit of training and coaching with them. They've been open all the way through the pandemic, but they've had people furloughed. So the company's been open, but they've had less staff. They're virtually all back now, but they've adapted a flexible working now where a few people will be off, and a few will come in. And they've just carried on as normal, really. But they are enjoying having that flexibility in the jobs that can, having that flexibility of working. And it's almost lightened the atmosphere that they feel they can choose. in certain jobs can choose.
Yeah.
So you know, where they've got family commitments or something like that, or they're caring for people, it's just been easier for them, which, you know, 2 years ago they probably wouldn't have even thought about. But it is very role dependent. I think the ones who are still there are quite relieved they've still got a job. So at the moment, and that might diminish in time, that it goes to being the norm, but I think there's quite a lot of relief that they haven't lost their jobs. Other organizations, I think they just seem to be managing it, but I still think there's that, are we nearly at the end of it feeling. So I think there's still an expectation that we might get back to normal from some people, not everybody, but from some people. So it does feel strange when you go back. It was really strange for me to go back into some companies and actually do face-to-face training again. And that did feel like a celebration. And
for me too. It's like, wow, this is great.
If they minded doing certain activities, because you know, do you mind sitting at a table together?
Well, we need to be careful, don't we, as trainers, not to be smashing people together. And I think when companies have been working together for a little while, then they're used to it. It was the shock of going in and having to wear a mask everywhere in this one company the once. And then the one week I walked in, I was the only one in a mask. And they just said, it's up to you. Oh, right. And no one else was wearing them. So so that was quite strange. And it's just adapting, isn't it? It is. Yeah.
You go through. But it's asking what people want. Some people feel better if they've got a mask on, or if they don't shake hands, and others, it's like, I'm happy to do anything, I'll go back to normal. So it's being flexible on an individual basis as well as an organization basis.
I was so surprised recently when I met somebody for the first time in person, and he held out his hand to shake hands. Can I do that? Okay, I'll choose to do that.
It just throws you now, doesn't it? I bought a car the beginning of September. I bought a new to me car, and the salesman, when we'd done the deal and everything, he went, do we shake hands on this? I thought it was nice of him to ask. And I said, we both use sanitizer when we came in and so on. And it was just nice to do something as ordinary as shaking hands. It's like when we suddenly allowed to hug. And I still ask friends, you know, are we hugging?
Are we hugging? I get that a lot too.
Okay, that's not very work related, maybe, but
well, I've been in workplaces where there were hugs going on as well. Are we hugging?
Well, you go to France. I mean, in France, I can remember going over to the labs of I used to work in the same company as my husband. We used to go over to the labs there, and every man they shook hands, and if the ladies were there, they'd be kissing on both cheeks. And you think, well, how have they coped? I mean, that was just their normal everyday thing. Every morning they'd do that, and every evening they'd do it, and that was part of their culture, and that must have been an even bigger shock to them.
I wonder if that's coming back
in the same way.
I wonder if that's coming back. I have no idea. I haven't been in touch with any French colleagues lately.
It'd be interesting to see how they're doing.
But I think, given this conversation, it's like the pandemic has forced us to take a step back and appreciate what we have.
Absolutely.
I can choose to go to work in the office, or I can choose this, or I appreciate my colleagues and coworkers, and appreciate.
And even one company I met, I was talking to, they have walking meetings.
Oh, on the phone, separately?
Outside. So they've been meeting up, and they have their meetings outside, walking.
Lovely.
The fitness, the stress management thing, and talking. I don't know how they minute it. Maybe they record it. I don't know. But I thought that was a fabulous idea to do that.
Absolutely. There's something special that happens when we walk together.
Yeah, you're in touch with nature as well. I think that's such an important thing. For mental well-being, you can't beat being out in nature. So when they said, we've done a 2 or 3 walking meetings so far, what a great idea.
Yeah.
So it's something I think of as a social aspect. I've met up with friends and walked with them, but I hadn't thought of it in a work aspect. So it's quite interesting to hear that. It's whatever works, isn't it?
Yeah. So we have lots of tips for people.
Yes.
Working tips and concerns as well. So there was the whole well-being and health and safety, things to pay attention to and be thinking about, and how do people like your husband do the packaging and sending of things, and what about customs forms
and
and all
technology
those
as
things.
well. If there's a problem, what do you do? Because we are 100% reliant on technology. I said earlier that my husband had a problem logging onto his computer last week, but to alert IT, you have to do it through their intranet on the computer. Well, if you can't get onto the computer, how do you get onto them? So he had to ring a colleague to get onto them to report it, and they had to ring him. And you just think, well, that's a most basic thing. But yes, it was a serious problem because he had to get onto it. And then they couldn't log on to his computer remotely because he needed an Ethernet cable. So he then had to go to another office where he could hook up to an Ethernet cable, and they could log on and sort it out for him.
Yeah. So we really need to solidify our backup systems if we keep doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think technology, we rely on it so much. So much. Really do.
I'm curious what other well-being type activities your people, the people you see, have been doing. So I love these walking meetings.
Yeah, the quizzes and the getting togethers like that. I think stipulating, a lot of them have set routines and stipulated breaks. So they say we will not have, and it's like a team agreement or an organisation agreement, we will not have any meetings between 12 and 2. So that, to force people to have a break from the computer and to benefit from non-Zoom time or Teams time, or it might just be an hour. Another suggestion that somebody came up with was that they're implementing it with their team, is to always finish a Zoom meeting. You know, we always sort of book it, we'll do it from 2 till 3, and we do the hour, but to do it for 50 minutes instead of an hour, to give somebody 10 minutes to clear their head afterwards. And I thought, that's quite good. Or do an hour and a half instead of a 2-hour meeting.
Yeah, I've met so many people who were back to back 7 hours or 8 hours in a row, no time, no real time. They had to, step out of a meeting just to have a bite to eat or to use the facilities and, get a glass of water. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
I've got a guy who I attend regular webinars with, Peter Thompson. He's a business guru. He always when he does his webinars, he has a break. He enforces a break in it. I mean, you can stay if you want to, but he calls it his wigwam break. T and a P. TP.
TP.
But I think you've got to have that control yourself to say, I've been on a meeting for 2 hours, I can't do another one now. So it is self-management, but also as a manager to manage your staff, to be encouraging them to do that, because it's wrong to be like that. Yeah. I've got trainers, I know trainers who are training for 6 hours a day, so they're delivering a normal training session for 6 hours a day online, and it's like, we've got to build in more breaks then. So for me, when I'm doing it, I find 6 hours of learning on a Zoom session too long. I've had a couple of webinars that have been all day, or conferences, and that's just exhausting. But I try to build in regular breaks. What I'm doing with most of my customers at the moment is saying to them, should we just do half-day maximum sessions? So
my sessions that I run with organizations, the max I usually do is 4 hours, and we shrunk those down to about 3.5 with 2 breaks in between, or a bigger half-hour break in the middle. A 3 hour, I'm doing some 3-hour meetings, which seem to go quite well with a 15-minute break in the middle. That feels like a really good time. I think people are really getting used to that. I am on faculty for an organization where they've run, we're used to running 3 full-day programs in person, and we converted those, and I've run a couple of them, and man, is it torture.
It's so tiring. It's tiring to deliver that, isn't it?
Yeah, and we took 2-hour breaks in the middle, and it's an early start and the focus, and it's tough.
I did a 3-day conference. I've done 2 3-day conferences, not run them, I've attended them. And it's a Canadian company, so it starts late for me anyway. and goes on till late, 10 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening, depending when they finish. And by the end of it, it's just awful. It really is. And yes, we have plenty of breaks, but it's actually coping with the mental stress of it. So I think when managers and HR is trying to sort out that kind of thing, they need to think about maybe restricting the length of time. We restrict drivers. If you've got company drivers, they are supposed to have a break every 2 hours or something, like a 20-minute break every 2 hours. So maybe we should do the same for screen time. And actually the display screen regulations do state you should have, I think it's a 20-minute break every 2 hours. So they're thinking the same thing, because it's not good for your eyes.
Yeah, so that's coming back to that physicality and health and safety, and there's got to be some new requirements.
And it's also a requirement for employers to put on an eye test every year for people who are dealing in display screen, which a lot of people might not have been doing so much of, because you have regular breaks because you walk into the coffee machine or the photocopier. But actually, when you're at home, you're probably going to be more fixed in front of the screen. So maybe set a timer on your watch or your phone or something, and that would really help. But I always say to people when I'm doing stress management, how many of you eat your sandwich, and this is at work or at home, how many of you eat your sandwich or your lunch in front of the computer? And most of them are going, right, don't. Have a lunch break and go out. If you can get out and go walk around, see a tree, go hug a tree or something, and get out into nature, it's so much better for you mentally. You come back recharge then, and it's that the pressure leaves you for a while, and then you can come back and think clearer again. So it's a benefit productivity wise as well as mentally,
absolutely
feeling better as well.
Yeah, in one of our programs we have it's a bite-sized learning online, and then conversations with colleagues, which don't have to be visual like this. But a lot of the learning is about noticing how your brain works and what gives you energy, what takes energy, and kind of examining that throughout a day. And there was recently one participant, she was so excited about her new plan where she went out to her garden and had a little walk around the garden, just 15 minutes. She's like, it's changed my day, absolutely changed my day. I'm never giving that up. I love the passion she had for it, just because she studied, so it's helpful. Maybe all of us should do a little bit of, where's your energy go?
Absolutely. I once trained a guy who was from a very well-known football club locally. He was a graphic designer for them, and he never took breaks. He always had his sandwich sitting by the computer and so on. And he came on this and he said, yes, I'm going to start doing that. When I saw him, when I went back into the club to see somebody else, but I saw him, I said, how are you getting on? He goes, I go for a walk every day. Great. It's a city centre club. So I said, oh, where are you walking? He said, I found a really nice little green space. If I've got time, I'll walk round it twice. If I've only got a short amount of time, I'll walk round it once. So I said, oh, great. Where are you going? He said, round the pitch. But that's fine. I mean, it's a football pitch is a big thing, isn't it? But he said, the added bonus was he's got to know the ground staff as well. So he was learning and meeting new people as well. And he said, it's just made such a difference to my mental health just to get out. Even if it's raining, puts a coat on and he just goes round and does as many laps as he wants to. And that was great. So even in the city, there are green spaces. I'm not saying they'd all allow you to walk around the local football pitches. But
probably not everyone can do that. But
no. But even if you just walk around the streets, you see something different, and you can benefit from the fresh air and a bit of nature that's around. So
absolutely, all that oxygen and fresh air is good for us as well. Just metabolizing stress chemicals for one thing.
Exactly.
Get the blood moving and all of that.
Yeah, and it just gets that break from the screen, doesn't it? We all need that. Yeah, I think it's blue sky. It's about term blue sky thinking. I mean, you might not get blue sky, especially this time of year, but it's that time to think and process and almost meditate. But you're walking around. It's just nice to have that break, isn't it?
Bit of mindfulness. Yeah, I love that. You're not going to get your blue sky thinking in front of a screen.
You're not going to get that, are you? Definitely not.
Not at all. Too much focus. Our brains need to have looseness and slowing down in order to tap into our creative centers, or at least it helps.
Definitely. And technology can help. You said about creative centers. Technology can help you be less or more creative. So it's working out what individuals need as to whether they need, you can be creative online because we can have the whiteboards and so on that are online. Sure. So if you're talking to people, you could have creativity coming in then. But some people have found it stifles them. So maybe going a meeting in person will help get more of a brainstorming and creative session going as well. So it's weighing up what people need as a team, either to solve problems or to do some creative thinking and so on, what they might need.
There's so many ways to tap into the creative mind, and most of it is not about being stable and structured.
Yeah,
it's about breaking out of the structures and giving yourself a chance to have some of that mindful space and slowing down. And
absolutely,
some people talk about getting your crayons out, Crayola, and coloring things, and your brain just starts doing different things.
Exactly. I like to do things like give them all a pack of Post-it notes each and say, right, I want all your ideas about such and such. And it might be something like, what are we doing well? And they all have to write one idea per Post-it note, and they all go up on the wall. What could we improve on? We, as in their organisation, what could we improve on? And they all go up, and then we regroup them into functions such as communication or environmental or something like that. So, and you can't do that in the same way on screen. I mean, you can. There are ways of doing it, obviously electronically, but I think just that physical standing up and walking around and sticking things on walls, it gives a different dynamic to sitting there and putting stuff on a screen.
And handwriting is so different for the brain than typing.
Yeah.
I
love anything like that because it is different, and it's not what they're doing. If you're sitting doing it on a computer, it's what a lot of people are doing on the computer as well. I think as well with going back to the different roles, it's managing people who aren't in roles that can work from home as well as those who are able to work from home. So if I take one of my examples, I'm trying to think now, say if I'm working with the council, for instance, all their office-based staff are fine because they're all computer-based, but then you've got somebody in parks or somebody in leisure, they can't work from home. So do they feel as though they're being penalized because they don't get that flexibility? They can't be given that flexibility in the same way. So it's managing them, and that's a big psychological difference.
And fairness is hugely important for everybody. We want fairness, and those people get to work from home, I don't even have the choice. Autonomy and fairness are big trigger points for people.
Absolutely.
So if I don't get
their perception of it as well.
Well, it is all based on perception. So if I don't feel that it's fair that those people get to work at home and I don't, I have to do this. This is my job description. What do I get? What benefits do I get by being here?
Absolutely. So there may be other benefits that they could give them, or allay their fears in some way. I don't know, but it is that perception of whether it's right or wrong and fair or not. So it's quite interesting to get that balance, really. And then the other one is performance management. I think that's quite a stress point for managers. That's where I quite often come in to help them work out how to manage their tasks, how to manage the tasks of the people who work for them, how to delegate properly, and how to monitor and manage that performance. That becomes a really different issue for them when it's being managed online.
And they can't see them every day, and there can't be the casual conversation. Every day of, how's that thing going? Always feels like checking in on how's that going. Online feels more
and you don't want to be monitoring so that you're micromanaging, but it does need different management. I think it is more so it might be a 10-minute check-in every morning just to say how things going, what's the system for today, what are we doing today, and it might be a team check-in or it might be an individual check-in, but certainly to have some method. One lady that I dealt with, I was coaching, she was being very casual about when she was getting work completed, and her manager wasn't very happy, and it turned out that he'd never told her the time limit that a particular piece of work, or any particular piece of work, was due in by. So she just prioritized it to how she thought, and it was different to how he thought. And he said walking around the office it was easy to sort of check up, but obviously online it isn't. So it's like, right, well in future, because I did team coaching with them, in future if you can say this work's got to be done by Friday, then that will give her a guideline of how urgent it is, and she can prioritize her work and know it's got to be in for then. But equally, if he doesn't say it, she's got to say to him, so when do you want it done by? Because
right.
Then
and neither of them, and both of them are need to be. Yeah.
And it's like, well, you don't make assumptions. Assume is not a good thing. But it is taking ownership of what needs to be done and how and when and so on. So
that expectation setting thing.
And working to smart objectives and so on. So the old come to the front again.
Yeah. So Janet, we need to wind down. It's heading towards the top of the hour.
Okay.
I just want to say a couple of words about one of the programs that we have on offer for folks who are here and maybe watching this and maybe watching this in the future on the recording. I am just sharing this screen here. I'm just going to say a couple of words about our Rewired to Lead program. It is, this program is a comprehensive leadership program. It's neuroscience based. It starts with a shorter program known as Rewired to Relate, which we offer also. People can take just that program. But in this program, there's a lot on culture. How do you create psychological safety? How do you have accountability? How do you have positivity, learning? Also, as leaders, how do you leave a legacy? And how do you work with diversity and inclusion? And again, it's all brain-based so that people can understand the drivers and the underpinning forces that happen in the brain that either create inclusion or don't create inclusion, have us run by our biases, but not just for inclusion work, but everything else in terms of creating a culture. So that's Rewired to Lead. People can learn more about that from ShookSvensson.com. And I am going to stop sharing that. I lost my stop share button. And was I not sharing that?
Nothing was sharing, Laurie.
Oh, there we go. Well, anyway.
Oh, there you go.
There's Rewired to Lead. This is the program I was talking about. You can go to ShookSvensson.com and look for that fun-looking gent there and learn more about Rewired to Lead. And so now I just want to give a big thank you to you, Janet, for being here and having a great conversation with me and sharing your wisdom and your experiences. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I've loved it. Thank you.
I hope we can have some more conversations about this sometime.
Definitely. So, yes, keep me informed.
Yeah, we definitely will. So thanks, Janet. We'll close for now. And thanks, everyone, for watching our webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
See you soon. Bye.
See you. Bye.